Welcome to the 30th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman along with Scott Beck. And Scott, last show, we talked at length about the Heather Crull versus Anaya Falcon four-match series. It went tech for Crull, and then 18-15 in favor of Anaya Falcon in the third place match of the World Team Trials Challenge tournament. It's another one of those head scratchers, especially because you only have about a month in between the matches, or actually less than a month. At the US Open, you had two kind of back to back, and then you had two at the World Team Trials. So the succession or the timeline is very short. So thinking back to another example of head scratching moments, we have to go back to 2022 when Kayla Miracle and Jennifer Paige, or Jennifer Rogers, it was different during that year, had a four-match series, 2022 US Open. Kayla Miracle did not have to wrestle in the US Open, if you remember. She was a returning world medalist. She had a spot in Final X already, but just wanted the competition.
And you can't do that now, you cannot do that.
Yeah,
And they've changed that. So,
they did.
but she did, yeah.
Yeah, she went into that and blitzed her way through. Adugo Wachuku was new on the senior scene. She got a takedown and then trapped arm gut wrench and teched her in the semifinals. And then she wrestles Jennifer Paige in the finals and wins in 18 seconds with a fall. She wrestled a brilliantly executed match, wins in 18 seconds. And then my recollection, Scott, is she got injured at some point during that 2022 season. Is that your recollection too?
Yeah, I don't think she was 100%. I'm not sure. I really don't recall what it was. And I would add, by the way, in that first match, that fall, it was like she got a single to the Paige's left leg. Kind of Paige was trying to fight it in the pod, and then Kayla just ripped a front cradle on it and stuck her. It was so tight. It was borderline an immediate fall when she was taking her back. So just to keep in her mind, she could have, quote, been deemed as catching her. I don't know. It wasn't, so it was dominant, but one move.
One
Well, two
move,
moves.
she wins, gets a fall. She's already in Final X. However, she has to postpone that because she was injured. So she postponed the Final X for several weeks. She goes in against Jennifer Paige, or Jennifer Rogers if you're looking it up, because I think that's what it's listed on Flow. They wrestle again, and Jennifer Paige absolutely blitzes Kayla Miracle and Texer. And we had actually talked, and we were thinking she might not even come back out, not because she doesn't have heart, but just maybe because of the injury. We're just thinking this might be it. She might not come out for the second match.
The crazy thing is, Kyle, I remember that conversation. I was like in a local grocery store and like watching the match on my cell phone because I had to pick something up. Then I called you like stunned after that result. And then we were saying, yeah, we don't even know if it's going to happen the next. Maybe she really is badly injured. We just did not know.
It does happen. She makes the adjustments, and then she ends up taking Paige in the second match. So now it's 1-1. And as you know, after that, you have about 45-minute window. So they come back out for the rubber match of the delayed Final X. Paige gets up 3-0, and then Miracle hits this kind of miracle 4-point throw out of bounds. One of the weirdest 4-point throws, even in the commentary. They said 2, and then they said, oh, no, 4.
Oh, she tries to throw it by 2. Will be exposure 4.
4 was the right call. She ends up winning 5-3.
It was crazy because, first of all, you got to give Paige a lot of credit because you don't know where her head's going to be. Okay, I just, blitz Miracle. I'm up one match, and now I just get tagged. So that's a weird thing. And she came out, and, she got a 3-0 lead. It was a shot clock point, I think, and then another 2. And there was a really weird position. They're near the edge to begin with. And Miracle still has they're in like seatbelt whizzer, I think. And Paige goes to step over and almost put a leg in. And Miracle smartly bucks up and then feels Paige there and kind of hips up more and then kicks her leg over to get the exposure. And it became a feet to back. And at that point, and she got a shot clock point, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it was in a 2-point lead, I think. Yeah. Somewhere in there's a shot clock point. So she's now up 5-3. And Kayla's pretty good about keeping a good stance and not getting scored in the last 30 seconds. Like really good. So she's just very mat aware and smart. She kept down blocking, circling, down block, circle. Paige never really even, got in on a leg or close to a takedown. But that was interesting. That's kind of like both of them showed a lot of heart and just shows us that we know nothing, trying to predict the next match, really.
Because, yeah, think about that. 18-second fall, you get teched, and then you tech them, and then you're down 3-0, and then you win 5-3.
How do you analyze that? Like, why bother?
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, we'll continue to discuss these because that's what's fun about this, and we'll continue to, I don't want to say necessarily make predictions or give thoughts on what may or may not happen, but it's gonna probably go out the window. Now we know some different wrestlers and their style and stylistically how it's gonna play out. Like in a meat Elor, you know she's gonna go to her underhook and get to a 2-on-1. You absolutely know that. But
Unless it gets shut down by Grove. But
well,
yeah,
but they
I know.
both
We
did.
know what you're doing. Yes.
We know that's gonna happen. But in that scenario, it's about adjustments. And the closest comparison I can think of is a volleyball game where some team may come out and they may blitz it 25-10, and then they win the next three. It's just kind of an up and down, and you don't know what's going to happen. That's the only thing I can think of to compare it to.
But what's weird to me is, and I'm not like, I know nothing, borderline nothing about volleyball, but I mean, I watched it. There's some quote bounces of the ball / luck, like something just touches the line, just misses the line. Something just catches the top of the net. Somebody's just a little off. It's like in basketball. Somebody can shoot lights out. One day they're a great shooter, but they just don't go in. They rim around. Wrestling, this is what's really, to me, perplexing about it. In general, combat sports are not random because they're physical. And normally the person with either that's more physical, stronger, quicker, any of those skills, and then the technique. Somebody over time, somebody with better technique should beat somebody with lesser technique, and especially if they have the physical skills. So it's not a very random sport. Anybody could have a bad day. And as we've talked about, there's a lot that goes into this psychologically, emotionally, physically. There's a lot. However, to see those back, like the Crull Falcon, I mean, how did that happen? The Miracle, these things, especially in a non-random sport, I don't, it's crazy. I think it happens a little bit more with women than men, but it happens a lot with men too. I've seen crazy reversals of results.
And that's what's crazy about looking at Heather Crull is I think highly of her and her skill set, and you just don't know what went into that. If it's I've wrestled her 3 times and dominated already. Do I want to get a 4th one here? And you're just not up for it. It's just hard to know the psyche too, because it does play such a mental
backside versus the front side. Because Falcon's ripping away through the back. Well, just lost, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's just mind-boggling, perplexing.
And then on the Kayla Miracle front, she's injured that year, and you wonder how she's going to do at the World Championships. And then she goes on and takes a silver and gets to the gold medal finals.
Yeah, wrestled a great tournament. Yeah, so, but listen. Kayla Miracle is the last person on the planet that would postpone a thing if she wasn't injured. That's just not her style, So, I'm sure she would, if she was injured, but time heals all wounds, right? I mean, she had some time before the, before the Worlds. So, it was really weird. And, Paige, looked really good too in those matches. So who knows?
I want to go to something you had talked about just during a conversation we had, and that is how do we make sure that we remember these women that have done a good job internationally and have had success, and then if they don't show up the following year, they just get forgotten. Just take a Dom Parrish who wins a 2022 World Championship. She's our Olympian. She doesn't show up to U.S. Open or World Team Trials, and then really nobody's really talking about it. How do we keep them in the ecosystem and make sure that just because they're not around, we don't stop talking about them? Even like a Maya Nelson, she's wrestling one day and then she's gone and nobody's talking about it. I would like to see a better way to keep our best in the ecosystem so we don't forget them.
Well, I think number one, obviously, having shows like this and people talking about wrestling and their names come up. So number two, who knows? For all we know, Don Paris is just taking a little time off and comes right back. I have no clue. It's up to her. Same thing with Maya Nelson. We just don't know. And number three, maybe, it is possible they don't want to be talked about. Maybe some people just kind of want to have done their thing and move on to the next stage of their life or whatever and want, you know, don't care to be talked. I don't know. I think though the biggest thing is, with the access to media now in terms of just being able to go back and look at brackets, I cannot imagine just because, I remember when I was younger, I wanted content on wrestling. I was a lunatic, obsessed with the sport. So I can't imagine that people don't go and, some of these young ladies, when they're just discovering the sport, they get obsessed with it, don't go in the wormholes, look back on the former world teams, go back to the brackets, read it. So, and then you can watch many of the matches are on YouTube or Flow, or UWW if you're not in the US. So I do think the access to resources is what keeps the memories, going, that you can see it, and look at the brackets.
Even if they don't want to be remembered, and I understand that line of thinking, I think it's important still to have some sort of a working knowledge that going back to Afsoon Johnston or back to Shannon Williams of Tricia Saunders, you should know who they are and they should be part of the fabric because they really did lay the groundwork to why we're here talking about women's wrestling like we are, going door to door, taking flyers, being the outcast, nobody understanding. I think that's important to understand the evolution of how we got to where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but I do think it is doing things like this, and trying to keep the names alive, and then, going off on tangents of the history, when we have the knowledge to share. I mean, I was at the U.S. Open, I was, watching matches, standing next to, Afsoon Johnson. We're just talking, and she appreciated it. She said she really likes the show, but appreciates what we're doing. And again, it's not to do this, but it's things like that the names themselves appreciate people talking about them. So I think it's incumbent upon, coaches, club heads, to give the, young ladies the history, to talk about the legends. I mean, any sport, it's always good to keep that, number one, because they were the pioneers, and I don't love that word, but, but to some extent they were, the trailblazer, whatever. But they're still involved and still follow it. So these people are still out there, like even on the men's wrestling. I mean, Dan Gable is a legend, but you could be standing next to Dan Gable at the airport in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I mean, so they're still out there, and we do our best, and I think with the access of media, it should be something that gets discussed and talked about.
And don't underestimate the value of winning an Olympic medal, world medal to a certain degree, or a world championship. But I can't tell you how many times women have said, I like Clarissa Chun because she's an Olympic bronze medalist. And that was a narrative over and over and over, and you kept hearing it over and over. They didn't know which side she shot her single to or what her setups were. It was that she won an Olympic bronze medal. Same with Gable. It's the story. It's 1972 Munich Olympics. 0 points surrendered. You know that narrative. You don't necessarily know that he was great at bar arms or what his setup shots were or how he executed the matches. There were 9-minute matches. You know the title and what happened with that title. And I think that's why it's so important to win championships or go to these world championships, because that sets up your name for life.
Well, yes, and especially to the layman community, right? Because I could be getting this wrong, but this is the way I remember it. Like, I believe Chun got to the Olympic semifinals and then didn't medal the first time. Then she goes and wins the world title, and then she takes an Olympic bronze. I could be wrong, but that's, I think, the sequence. Correct me if I'm wrong. You pull one of your little things over it. But I think it's funny. The first thing that comes to my mind with Chun, obviously that, I'm friendly with her, a good person, whatever. I think of her as a world champion and an Olympic medalist. Like, to me, like a world champion, I can, the average person, though, And there is something about an Olympic medal, obviously, but it's kind of cool. She won the world championships. And I think, but let's just say Chun goes Olympic semis, world championship, and let's say she doesn't win the Olympic medal or win the gold medal. Let's say she losing the finals and losing the semis and takes a bronze again. So is she any less of a legend because she didn't have an Olympic gold medal? Maybe to some people, yes, maybe, but I don't look at it that way, but I'm sure many do. Just getting to, first of all, just signing up and going to the Olympics is impossible, right? To begin with. Just go to the sign-in sheet. That's the most common question I ever have when you talk about wrestling. Are they going to go to the Olympics? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll sign up. You got to make world teams, make Olympic teams, qualify. Qualifying for the Olympics is very difficult. Anybody can go to the Worlds if you make it for your country. I mean, you might have had a weigh in at the Continentals or something, or have an athlete do that. But, just getting to, the Worlds, the Olympics. So, maybe the layman thinks any less, but I would not have thought any less of Clarissa Chun if she didn't get an Olympic medal.
I wouldn't either. Of course, the world title certainly sparkles the brightest here, but when you're talking to the public and they don't know, you say Olympic anything, medal or whatever it is, that really resonates. And I may have brought this up before. I worked at the Gable Museum for 16 years. I've never heard anyone lie about making a world team. It's always lying about making an Olympic team. And I've heard I've heard that so many times. My grandpa wrestled at the Olympics, my great grandfather. I wrestled the Olympics. They never lie about making a world team. It's always lie about making an Olympic team. And
because it's the allure, I guess.
It's the allure of it. But let's just take two people here. Adeline Gray, we don't know if she's retired. I would assume she is. She has 6 world championships, Olympic silver medal. Is she done? How do we keep her in the consciousness so that her credentials and her accomplishments don't get forgotten? There's just an example there. I don't know if she's going to make an announcement, but she's had another child, so maybe she's just moved on with her life, Scott.
Maybe, but I think Adeline Gray will be in the discussion. First of all, she's a 6-time world champion. So should we think any less of her because she didn't win an Olympic gold medal? I don't. I mean, but just throwing that out there. 6 world titles, pretty damn impressive.
Incredible.
Incredible. Insane. But I think Adeline Gray will be around. I think she loves the sport. I think she likes, working with people, when she's not focused on herself. And I can't imagine just Adeline Gray just disappearing, off the face of the discussion. I just don't see that. And maybe she will wrestle again, number one, but even if she doesn't, I just think she'll be part of every discussion. And maybe she, coaches, whether it's a national team, a college or just a club. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine her just disappearing, but who knows?
And then are you prepared for having that shelf life? So Sarah Hildebrandt gets mobbed after winning an Olympic gold medal. You see her at the airport and it's an incredible scene. That won't last forever. And I think she understands that. Same with the meet. She gets mobbed at the World Team Trials Challenge tournament.
You've got like a ton of fans waiting for you.
That's not going to be me go on forever, although it did for Gable. So I don't want to say that can't happen. I think that there are certain people that transcend the sport, and I think Amit Elor, maybe Sarah Hildebrandt will be those people. But it tapers off a little at some point. Are you ready for that when it happens?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Sometimes I might want it to happen. When you're like these legends, everybody wants a piece of you. They want, whether it's talk to you, have you sign something, give you a piece of memorabilia, recount a story. And maybe some people love that. Some don't. I mean, it must be a thrill to walk in somewhere and be called out as an Olympic gold medalist or world champion. Some people get uncomfortable with it or just get tired of it. You have to understand. I mean, I'm not telling you that you don't know, because you know Gable very well. You've seen all the, somebody always wants something, from many of these people. And maybe they, at some point, just want to be left alone and live their life.
And I've seen that situation where Dan has been at an autograph signing was fantastic. There were hundreds of people. The line lasted for 2 hours. He had to leave. And then there was one last person that was like, hey, I missed you. Can I get an autograph? And he kind of blew him off a little bit and said, all right, hurry up. And then he ran off. And you think, that wasn't the best exchange. Even though the previous 250, he was absolutely golden with them. It's just you're always going to miss at some point and you're never going to give them exactly what you want. That's a hard situation to be in.
Yeah, and it's also some of the recipients are not always so courteous, and you can't win sometimes. Like there's got to be a deadline. I mean, I have a sister-in-law who's fairly famous as an actress, and she just gets mobbed sometimes. And but many people would have no idea who she is, right? But other people, the fanatics, know, and sometimes it can be too much, or the questions can be inappropriate. You just don't know.
And Kennedy Blaze just had that situation at the U.S. Open where everyone wanted an autograph, and her thought is, or picture, I got to compete. I'm just like you guys. I got to get ready. I got to get in the zone. I think she had to go elsewhere to be able to just stay away from the the frantic fans, and I think that's important to understand some spacing too.
Yeah, and it is up to like whether it's a parent that happens to be around or a coach or a club, or teammates to just kind of help them out a little bit and not keep people away too. Because I mean, at the end of the day, when you're still competing, you have a routine and you don't want to be distracted and you want to go through this. It's the guy that doesn't practice the putt on the green is the guy that, misses a 2-foot putt. Well, they still can miss them. But if you notice, professional golfers literally do the same exact thing on every single, whether it's a regular shot they're going through a routine, when they're in the green. And it's a very interesting sport. If you read like sports psychology books, a lot of times some of the good sports psychology coaches or golf ones, because it's even more in the mind than wrestling, because you could do the same muscle memory shot a million times. And then whether it's under pressure, whatever, thoughts creeping in your head, you miss it, but nobody's grabbing you or touching you. The ball's just sitting there, right? So it's totally your control. But part of that is a routine. Keep doing the same routine always. Look at it the same way. And I think that's, at a high level wrestling, they have warm-up routines. You got to be ready. And trust me, the day you're not, somebody's going to take you out. I do not care who you are.
Still, and I understand the spacing part, but I will say this, growing up a fan of John Smith and Gable, when you see them in person for the first time, it takes your breath away. It's like, they're real.
It's pretty crazy because I've met Gable a bunch of times in my life, and it's like somebody that was your legend, your idol, like it's very awkward. Like I think I'm fairly decent at talking to people and, extemporaneous or whatever. With Gable, I was like almost like Ralph Crandon in The Honeymooners, if anybody knows that. Like humma. Like I didn't even know how to speak. And then how about trying to talk to Tom Brands, who, it's not just that, he's a legend in the sport or something, but he's also so intense and intimidating, even when he's being totally relaxed and nice. It's like, wow, I'm talking to Tom Brands. The guy's so intense and I love him, but so talking to these people is kind of awkward too. It's just a weird dynamic when you look up to someone and you're actually in front of them,
Yeah, I had the same thing with Tricia Saunders when I saw her at the dual meet in Carver Hawkeye. At first, I kind of steered clear, like, that's Tricia Saunders. And then finally, I went and did an interview, but I hung on every word, anything she wanted to say. I wasn't going to interject anything of my thoughts. I just wanted to hear from her. And yeah, she's larger than life to me in that situation too.
And the funny part about that is too, like taking the other side where I'm saying they want to be left alone. And sometimes, in many times, especially within their circle, famous people and anything, they're people. They need to talk to people too, but they're just they have to be more guarded because many people want something. So within their inner circle, they want to be treated like normal people for the most part.
But I can tell you this, when this new Iowa women's wrestling docuseries comes out that Mark Bader and Flo are working on, a lot of these women that are featured are going to get a level of celebrity that maybe they aren't accustomed to yet. I think of a Lily Luft. I think she's a rock star right now, being from Charles City and being in Iowa. I think this docuseries is going to take that to an even higher level when people see it. And I think she's going to be able to capitalize on some of that celebrity that a film like that gives.
Oh, that's fun. And it's good for them. And then, God knows their sport needs some celebrity and it'll be great for the ladies. I mean, to me, it may be annoying to her, but I think it's great that Kenny Blades has people, coming up to her. I mean, it's good for the sport. Or, when Helen's walking around, or Adeline or Sarah. I mean, it's good. But you need these legends.
Yeah, and it happens in different spaces for an Amit Elor. I think she's super popular in the combat space. If she goes down to jiu-jitsu, I think she has a level of celebrity there, and it's just after winning the Olympic gold because Kennedy Blades hits those 5-point throws. I think she has a different level, and I think Kylie Walker being the face of the Iowa women's wrestling program, the first one to sign, and what she's been able to do, she has a different niche than the other two. So everyone has their niche and they're all famous for different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Welker's fame is just starting.
Yeah, she's going to do great things. She's already doing great things. Hey, let's talk about this. The college wrestling scene for women, it still continues to, I don't want to say baffle me, but I think it's one of the cool things is that they're going in a completely different lane because they have to in a lot of ways than the men's side. And I look at what's happened with the transfer portal, a lot of those King University girls that were high level, they're going down to Tarleton State, which is a club program right now with Jason Mormon. We don't know if it's going to be a Division I program yet. The talk is that it might, but there's nothing solid right now. It's going in the direction that it's going to be a club program for the next season. So you have high-level girls saying, we're going to go down to a club program because we want to be with Jason Mormon. And then you have two age-level world medalists going to Iowa Central and Erica Pastoriza and Valerie Hamilton. That just wouldn't probably happen in men's wrestling because it's laid out different. So Iowa Central right now battling Indian Hills in a in-state rivalry with Iowa. Indian Hills has been the dominant JUCO program, so maybe Iowa Central's making a run at them. So there's just a lot of things when you look at where these top high school girls are going. NAIA, D3, D1, club, JUCO, you just don't know where they're going to land. I think that's a special part of why women's wrestling is a unique space.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have talked about this, that we don't know how it's going to ultimately evolve, and nobody does. So the landscape is being formed, and I think what you're seeing too, it's about trust and the coach specifically. Like you see, like a Janiak went to Aurora, Crystal Rodriguez went to Doane, right? So you have these athletes going with I never heard of either of those schools before. Sorry, everybody, but I didn't. And many people, unless you're in those local areas, probably didn't. It's not like Oregon State or or like North Carolina. I mean, these are just smaller schools that just may have more of a local taste. But they went because of the coach, the relationship, the trust that they believe that coach is going to help get you from here to there, right? So. In the case of Janiak, she keeps improving, getting better. Rodriguez has done phenomenally well. Listen, Audrey Jimenez went to, Lehigh. It was still a club, right, when she signed there, with the belief it's going to become Division I. And I am sure Jason Mormon has very good relationships with the people we're talking about, right? They trust him. They know him. I can't imagine if he doesn't truly have a really good feel and knowledge that this transition is going to happen. He's not going to deceive people to come with him to these clubs. So we don't know the exact time frame. Some things take longer, but it's just evolving. And how it ultimately pans out, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be exactly like men's wrestling or the same landscape. It's going to be different, and that's fine.
It absolutely will be different. And I think what this does is it makes us pay attention to every single lane. Now I'm checked into junior college, NAIA, NCAA is all together. And then which one has scholarships? How are the D3 programs doing against the D2 and D1? It really makes it fascinating because you want to answer these questions a lot of times. And if you have crossover and every lane is good, you're going to pay attention to every single lane. And I think that's really what can separate women's wrestling from any other sport. It's special that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll toot your horn on this. You've done an exceptionally good job covering all these lanes and making sure you're giving the focus to all these different whether they're national tournaments, regionals, opens, covering it among all different like kind of angles. And it either means you're a lunatic or a great journalist, yet to be determined, or both. But you really do, and you have to. It forces you to. Division III, Jason Bryant does a very good job on his, the email he sends in the morning where he gives what's going on. He breaks it down by division, and he does a good job giving you that content or the links to Division II, Division III, JUCO, women. Very few do, right? And it's important that we do that. But he's one of the few with the men. So for the most part, unless you're really into it or know the people, I got to be honest with you, I don't follow Division II or Division III men all that much. But you have to with the women because you could have some of the best athletes. There just aren't, or NAIA. I follow zero NAIA men's wrestling, like zero, other than knowing Grandview never loses, right? But pretty much zero. Division III, I know the Wartburg, Augsburg rivalry. That one of those two teams normally always wins the title forever, right? And it goes back and forth. But and the third came up this year, right? But the idea though that we wouldn't follow that with women, you have to follow all of it. So and you do a good job, making people aware of that and giving the content.
And you have to follow that, and then you have to even go to high school because there's high school girls challenging the college, and then even with Decker going to see. So really, it's this ecosystem that you have to follow everything. And then going back to what we said earlier, because of that ecosystem, I want to make sure that people are now following. How did we get this? How did it evolve? How did Afsoon Johnston win first world medal and come from Iran and come to the United States? And how did Tricia Saunders win 4 world championships? And then you have that middle lane in the 2003 world championships where we win 7 medals and we lose to Japan on criteria. Like that's an important narrative, and everyone should know that history. And so I want it to all be one. That would be my goal. Let it all be part of the ecosystem, the history, the current, and then the future. And then we're talking about it all. That's the goal.
Yeah. And as you know, it's a lofty goal and goals take time. So, we're trying, and I'm sure a lot of other people are, but the history is really important. Like in the student sport, it's important, not just for the sake of the athletes. I do think it's great for the sake of the athletes to talk about them and they've earned it. But I also think just to see where we've come from, like, we're just understanding how different countries wrestle different ways, or, who beat this legend from a certain country, nobody, the idea that, I'll go back to men for a second, but, Brandon Slade beat Bavasa Satir, that is a shock. I mean, Bavasa Satir is one of the best ever, but people lose. But understanding that, things like that are important. And when, Helen Maroulis beats Sarah Yoshida, I mean, she was only a 13-time world champion, a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. And Helen was zoning in 15, didn't give up a point. You knew she was ready. They game planned for it, and she shut her down to the point where she threw a desperate headlock at one point. It was so perfectly wrestled a match, and that's important that people see that now, for sure.